In the world of ancient Rome, law was absolute. But justice, well, it wasn't always swift. In fact, it was often slow, agonizing, and designed as a public spectacle of pure terror. We're about to go deep into the grim reality of a system where punishment wasn't just a sentence, they had turned cruelty into an art form.
Okay, so get this. The person who said this wasn't some enemy of Rome. This is a Roman, the great orator Cicero, talking about his own society's practices. Even to them, some punishments were so horrific, they were literally unspeakable. That right there sets an incredibly chilling tone for what we're about to uncover.
Because, you see, in Rome, justice wasn't just about punishing a crime. It was a brutal tool of power, a public theater of shame, and a way to keep everyone under absolute social control. Every single punishment was designed to send a crystal-clear message to everyone watching.
And no crimes were considered worse, more offensive to the state than the ones that threatened its very core, betrayal and cowardice. For those crimes, the damnation was meant to be swift, public, and unforgettable.
When someone betrayed the state, or when soldiers broke and ran from the enemy, Rome's response was more than just lethal. It was designed to be deeply and permanently shameful. It was a lesson written in blood and fear for all to see.
The punishment for treason was engineered to be a sudden, shocking spectacle. It was a very literal, physical fall that was meant to mirror the traitor's social fall from the grace of Roman society.
And this gives us a perfect window into the Roman mind. Being thrown from the Tarpeian Rock wasn't just about the 80-foot drop. It was about the crowd watching you fall. The act carried such an incredible stigma of shame that it would stain your name, your family, forever. So you see, the humiliation was just as much a part of the punishment as the impact at the bottom.
But what happened when the failure wasn't just one person, but an entire military unit? I mean, Rome couldn't just execute a whole cohort of its own soldiers, so they devised a punishment that was psychologically devastating.
Decimation. The name itself comes from the Latin word for removal of a tenth. It was cold, it was calculated, and it was brutally random. After a unit was found guilty of something like cowardice or mutiny, the soldiers were all lined up and their fate was left entirely to a lottery.
And this is where the true horror of it kicks in. The 9 men in each group who drew the safe lot, they were forced to beat the 10th man to death, usually with clubs. Can you even imagine the terror? Your life is decided by a random draw, and if you survive, you're forced to become the executioner of your friend, your brother in arms. It was a method designed to completely shatter morale and then brutally rebuild it through pure fear.
But Rome's creativity and cruelty didn't stop there. Some crimes were considered so unnatural, so offensive to the gods and to the very fabric of society that a simple death just wasn't enough. No, the perpetrator had to be ritually erased from existence. And the ultimate example of this? The punishment for killing your own parent.
This punishment, known as Poena Cullei, or the penalty of the sack, wasn't just an execution. It was a dark, symbolic ritual. The entire goal was to deny the condemned any connection to the world they had so horribly violated.
Just listen to this process. Every single step is symbolic. After being beaten, the killer's head is covered, denying them sight of the sky. Then, they're sealed in a leather sack with 4 animals, each one with its own dark, symbolic meaning. And finally, the sack is thrown into a river or the sea. The logic was terrifyingly complete. While they were still alive, the condemned lost the use of every element. The sky was taken from them before death, and the earth was denied to them in burial.
But not all punishments were shrouded in some dark ritual. Oh no, many were performed in the blazing sun of the arena, which is where the line between justice and just gruesome entertainment completely vanished. This was damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. Criminals, runaway slaves, and later on Christians were thrown defenseless into the arena to be torn apart by lions, bears, and wild boars, all for the amusement of a roaring crowd. It was literally justice as a blood sport.
And as this eyewitness account shows, these events were often highly theatrical. The condemned were sometimes forced into costumes, forced to play roles in these twisted mythological reenactments. But this quote reveals a fascinating detail. Apparently, even the Roman mob had its limits. The spectacle of forcing prisoners into religious robes was seen as so degrading that the crowd actually objected, and they were changed back into simple clothes right before being sent to their deaths.
But of all the methods of death the Romans perfected, one stands above all others in its infamy. It was a punishment engineered not just to kill, but to maximize pain, to maximize humiliation, and to serve as the ultimate public deterrent.
Crucifixion was a slow, systematic torture. It started with a brutal scourging that would leave the victim in a state of shock. Then came the public humiliation of carrying the heavy crossbeam through the streets. Finally, the agony of being nailed to the wood, where death could take days from shock, dehydration, and eventually suffocation. And that final act, breaking the legs, that wasn't an act of mercy. It was just to speed up death so the guards could go home.
And if you ever wondered just how profound the agony of this punishment was, think about this. Our modern word for unbearable pain, excruciating, comes directly from the Latin words for out of crucifying. The pain of the cross literally defined the absolute limits of human suffering for the ancient world.
So, who endured this excruciating fate? Well, like Cicero made clear at the very beginning, never a Roman citizen. This was a punishment reserved for those Rome considered less than human: slaves, pirates, enemies of the state, and the lower classes. It was the ultimate expression of social hierarchy, a death that declared to the world that you were nothing in the eyes of the empire.
So what do we make of all this? This systematic, theatrical, and often ritualistic cruelty. It reveals something really deep about the society that practiced it.
Every single punishment we've looked at was a performance. It was the state demonstrating its ultimate authority over life, over death, and even over memory itself. It was a tool to keep an empire of millions in line, not just through laws, but through carefully orchestrated terror.
And this leaves us with a final, pretty unsettling thought. If the ways a society chooses to punish its own reflect the core values of that civilization, what does this brutal legacy tell us about the soul of Rome? And maybe, more importantly, what does our own modern system of justice reveal about us?